Resident Evil.
Zero is a jarring mess of ideas. Each area feels like it's from a different game. RE1 Remake marked the end of the classic Resident Evil game in this glorious swan song, while Resident Evil 4 ushered in the new era of action-oriented Resident Evil, making Resi Zero the awkward emo phase of the series, when it's just trying to figure itself out. The idea of a prequel to Resident Evil had been around since the launch of the first game. Resi Zero began development in 1998 for the N64 disk drive attachment, which boasted more storage space than cartridges and online capabilities. The 64DD was made to compete directly with Sony and Sega's consoles. It was destined to save the N64, and after 5 years of development, it sold 15,000 units and never released outside of Japan. Development shifted to a cartridge-based Resident Evil that came with its own limitations. Fearing comparisons to Code Veronica that utilized the Dreamcast's optical disc drive, Capcom Production Studio 3, with lead director Koji Oda, had to think smarter and change their approach to level design and gameplay. That's pretty evident in the train section, a demo of which was shown off at the January 2000 Tokyo Game Show, with 20% of the game completed and the release date set for July of that same year. The entire development process was mainly trial and error, with the team having to restart multiple times. The developers were experimenting with faster zombies that would soon go on to become the Crimson Heads in the RE remake. They even had couch co-op at one point. Resi Zero soon ran into even more problems, the biggest one being that it wouldn't fit on a single cartridge. So the entire game was scrapped and development began from the ground up for Nintendo's next upcoming console, the GameCube. At the time, Capcom Production Studio 4 with lead director Shinji Mikami was working on the Resident Evil 1 remake. Both teams worked closely with Resi Zero, utilizing the same pre-rendered backgrounds and high-quality 3D character models. Resident Evil Zero finally released on November 12, 2002, a whole 8 months after the Resident Evil 1 remake. It was then ported to the Wii in 2008, and in 2016 a HD remaster released for all major consoles and PC. The game revolves around STAR's team medic Rebecca, and all-round bad boy Billy.
So, you seem to know me. Been fantasizing about me, have you?
As they survive a zombie outbreak set just one day before the original Resident Evil. Rebecca can mix herbs with her chemistry set, while Billy adds more health. Players zap between the two to solve puzzles and progress through the game. Resident Evil has always had two main characters in their games, so if you ever wondered, what's Barry up to? Well, here you go. Resident Evil Zero is more of a test of patience rather than skill. This is an old game. The controls were archaic even when it was released. For those who are unfamiliar, classic Resident Evil uses tank controls. Up and down on the D-pad moves you front and back, while left and right rotates your character on the spot. Luckily, the HD remaster comes with analog support. You can control both characters with the left and right stick. The game also has fixed camera angles. Love 'em or hate 'em, they give us these beautiful pre-rendered backgrounds that still hold up. The downside being having to reorient yourself to the angle change. It also comes packed with this Leech Hunter mode, where Rebecca and Billy have to find 100 randomly placed leeches in the training facility. It was a really fun bonus mode, which gave you a bunch of ammo to experiment and go wild and unlock bonus weapons for the main game. The HD remaster has a Wesker mode, where the game replaces Billy with Wesker. Now Wesker is better because, well, he's got the Psychic Blast that can one-shot almost every enemy in the game, and he can do this charged up sprint that makes him run like that weird kid on the playground. Resident Evil has always had immaculate item placement, giving you just enough ammo or just enough health to get by. Not this one. On normal difficulties, I was never running low on pistol ammo. I'm the type of player who collects every Magnum round and ends the game with every Magnum round. In the early parts, the hallways are way too tight and Rebecca has so little health, your only option is to kill every zombie. So you do, and the game gives you enough ammo to do so. There's no penalty to killing zombies, no crimson heads. Enemies even respawn after you clear a room. You can stun lock enemies and even counter their attacks. You're rewarded for precision aiming with critical hits, or you can spray and pray. The spectacle of busting down a door and unloading your mag until everyone stops moving is just good fun. Inventory management has always been one of my favorite aspects of the Resident Evil franchise. Definitely give the player manual a read because they have streamlined the menus as much as they could, but it's still a learning curve. Both Rebecca and Billy have 6 inventory slots, with larger items taking 2 slots. So having a big gun, a small gun, ammo for both, and a healing item doesn't leave you with much space, until you realize players don't have 6 slots, they have 12. Splitting items between the two and moving together as a unit is where the game shines. Ape together is strong. The downside being, after every fight, this is how you reload. And you do that a lot. The biggest change the game makes is getting rid of the item box. What you could do now is drop items anywhere you please. This feature splits the fan base. On one hand, you don't have to run back to an item box to drop off an item just so you can pick up another one. If your inventory is full, you can just drop whatever item you don't need, combine herbs on the fly, and just pick it up later. However, it's just inconvenient. You end up dumping all your stuff on the floor and it's next to impossible to pick up the specific item you need. Not to mention, when entering new areas, you have to make multiple treks back and forth. The game does open up shortcuts, reducing the time it takes, but still. Where the game is definitely lacking, however, is the enemies. You got your basic zombie. I love how the zombies on the train all have different outfits. Zombie dogs return, with the game showing some restraint, with there only being 4 dogs in the entire game. But we don't get off that easy. These monkeys, these boring ass regular monkeys, are somehow even worse than the Rottweilers. They move faster, they have so much health, and can just stun lock you in the corner. They're not fun to fight, or interesting to look at. Just look at this earlier design, which was left on the cutting room floor. They also had these dollies at one point that would hang off the ceiling and drop down, which were, I guess, replaced by the spiders and hunters from Resident Evil 1. Another enemy they had in the works was this spider-infested human, which is just disgustingly creepy. This again got cut because it felt out of place in a Resident Evil game. By far, the worst enemies are these leechmen. They move fast and have this range attack that just doesn't feel fair. When you kill them without using flame rounds or a Molotov cocktail, they explode and leave behind leeches. The second last boss is just a larger version of them. Resident Evil has always had memorable bosses rather than good ones. The boss fights aren't exactly exhilarating. Most have you standing in a spot while the boss is stun locked or soaking up damage. Like this giant scorpion that jumps onto a moving train and takes 26 shots to down. Most bosses are just big creatures like the centipede that isn't just Yawn the snake, or a giant flying bat, or the tyrant from Resi 1 twice. The bosses and enemies that made it into the game just feel bland. It doesn't fit the grandiose opera-singing villain that the game builds up so much. Usually Resident Evil games before this one had tight, self-contained stories. Resi 0 marked the beginning of Resident Evil taking itself too seriously. The game starts off with this cheap, true crime documentary narration done by William Shatner.
Though it is believed that the international enterprise Umbrella was somehow involved, little is known as to the origin of this faceless corporation. When was it established? By whom?
All of a sudden, Seymour Guado starts commanding his leech army to take over the train. This guy might just be my new favorite Resident Evil bad guy. He's up there with Salazar and Wesker. All he cares about is his revenge against Umbrella and his beloved leeches.
They cleaned the copper out of my blood. Doctors gave me a couple of years to live. Those bloodsuckers might give me a few more.
Even his co-workers think he's batshit insane. Today, under Director Marcus's orders, I changed the platform entry code. Later, I asked him what the source of the entry code was. He told me it was based on something significant in his, children's growth. But the director's a loner. He doesn't have any children. So, because this guy couldn't be trusted and his progenitor virus just wasn't that good, Wesker and Birkin assassinate him and steal his research for the TNG virus. So, because they throw his body in the Umbrella sewer and it mixes with his leech research, bringing him back to life as a young boy, and he's the one who released the virus and has been the real mastermind behind the Resident Evil games, and who cares? Rebecca and Billy see him once in the entire game. He gives an evil monologue and turns into a weird leech monster, and that's it. The mansion explodes, Billy disappears, never to be seen again, and Rebecca looks to the right where there's another mansion. I guess that's fine. I guess it ties it to the next game. Really not sure what they were going for. It doesn't really complement RE1 and it doesn't really work as a standalone game, like Enrico.
Enrico!
The Enrico cameo? You know Enrico. He likes golf. He shows up and goes, "There's zombies here, Bex. I'm going to the other mansion." And Rebecca's like, "Who?"
I never saw him again.
What put me off this game for so long was that I thought it was set entirely on a train. How do you make exploring a train interesting? Well, the train is just a prologue, and depending on who you ask, the best part. Resident Evil game structure goes as follows. You start off in a big explorable environment like a mansion or a precinct, and then there's a smaller connecting area like a sewer or a sewer, and finally ending in a giant lab with metal corridors for you to offload your ammo. Resident Evil 0 starts off with a small connecting area as an introduction before the game opens up, and I think I prefer that. The game pushes you through the 5 carriages of this poorly designed luxury carriage. There's a memo in this game given to train employees that says, "Oh, to open and close the automatic door, go to the 3rd carriage window, climb up onto the roof to switch it on and off. To operate the emergency brakes, you have to run to the back of the train, then to the front just to enable it." And who designs this stuff? In the train, one of the characters gets trapped in a room with a dumbwaiter while the other one has to save them, and one glaring problem appears. The puzzles are too easy. I never hit a roadblock in the entire game, which, again, depending on who you ask, is either a good thing or a bad thing. I fall into the latter. You interact with this hatch and it says it can only be opened with a specific tool. Okay, you go about what you were doing and oh, here's the hatch opener tool. When you get the hookshot, the worst item in the game, it tells you step by step what to do with it. This happens over and over again. The most difficult puzzle in the game is the one where you have to do maths under time pressure. Once you manage to stop the train, you go through a sewer and arrive at the other mansion in the Arklay Mountains, Umbrella's training facility. This is when the game opens up. Due to a lack of an item box, the training facility's design feels streamlined. Every path you take doubles back to the main lobby area. The puzzles are placed in practical locations. You never have to backtrack. You can complete a puzzle in one lap. Once you get the fire key, you can head straight to the first red door you saw in the dining room. There you'll find lighter fluid for Billy's lighter. Now you can head to either the main library or the last fire door that are located in the same corridor. The game does this again with the clock puzzle. You unlock 2 doors on your way back to the main hall. The first door is right next to where you exit, so you'll probably head there first, where you'll find film for the projector in the second unlocked door that's further out. The game doesn't have you holding onto items for too long, except for the hook shot. When you pick up an item, the chances are you're gonna have to use it in the next 15 minutes. And the facility is designed with a limited inventory in mind. The problem with that is you lose the feeling of being lost in a giant spooky mansion. You don't wander the halls making risky journeys trying to figure out how to escape. The horror of RE just isn't there. A lot of people don't finish Resident Evil 0, and the lab section is probably why. For starters, remember the hook shot that you used at the start of the game once and then forgot about? You have to backtrack to wherever you left it to progress. The game then splits you up. If you're lucky, you send Rebecca up where she can use her mixing set for the first time to create a stripping agent with nearby chemicals. If you send Billy up, then Rebecca needs to backtrack to the facility to find the red and green chemicals, then return to Billy. You have to constantly send supplies up and down this dumbwaiter with an unskippable cutscene. Some parts do work. Having to navigate the unkillable leechmen putting in combinations while under pressure, until you finally get the cable car running and the game has 2 more goddamn sections after this. Pacing in this game is a problem. It starts off fast and there's a slow, relaxing mansion to explore, and then industrial plants where nothing new really happens as you just limp to the finish line. The game's got problems, but I can't help but find something appealing about its charm. It had a troubled production, so many ideas just couldn't be used. There's a version of the script where Billy would turn on you and become the big bad. There's a version where Wesker was supposed to be hunting you the entire time, but got scrapped because it didn't fit the Resident Evil name. And I think that's the biggest problem this game has, being a Resident Evil game. It's too similar to RE1 Remake. Capcom must have just wanted to get it out the door, having spent too many resources on it already. Which is why most of the bosses are reskins and many of the enemies carry over. I think it's far from what the developers had in mind.
開発しようとしていたハードは他ハードに比べて特に容量面では有利とは言えない状況でした。そこでロムという不利を逆に武器にしてこれまでバイオシリーズがやろうとしてできなかったことを意欲的に盛り込んでいこうとしていました。しかし一番苦労したのはやっぱりバイオという一大ブランドを冠したタイトルを作っていくというプレッシャーでした。自分だけでなくスタッフにも相当苦労をかけたと思います。